Now, company bosses are to get new powers, as we're hearing from Sarah Jane, to fire underperforming workers under a shake-up of employment laws. Let's talk to the Business Secretary, Vince Cable, who's in Westminster this morning. The TUC says you're letting bad employers off lightly.
Well, that's wrong. We're trying to strike a balance here. We do respect and want to preserve basic worker rights. We very firmly rejected some proposals that came forward for a kind of hire and fire culture. We're definitely not going down that road at all. At the same time, we want to make it easier for small, medium-sized companies to hire staff without the worry of getting into a very legalistic, costly, time-consuming tribunal system. So where we do have disputes, dismissal procedures, for example, to try and deal with it outside of courts, tribunals, trying to deal with it through conciliation, wherever possible, through what we call settlement agreements on a voluntary basis, and generally make it easier to hire people, which is what we want to do, clearly, when there is a lot of unemployment.
I mean, clearly there's a lot of rhetoric flying about this issue, I mean, as you would expect, but the TUC does make a very salient point when it says you could deter victims from pursuing genuine cases. That has to be a concern.
Well, as you say, there is a lot of rhetoric flying around. We do not want to discourage people from, legitimate issues, and that's why we've very firmly rejected the idea of a hire and fire system. There's one point that the TUC have been raising, which is about the level of compensation payments. Under law at the moment, you can be paid up to $73,000 in an unfair dismissal case. In practice, tribunals typically award $5,000–6,000. This has the unfortunate effect that a lot of companies are intimidated by a fear they could really be taken to the cleaners, which is big sums of money for small companies, and equally, probably some workers, not many, but some will want to go to a tribunal in the hope of getting a lot of money, which they're not going to get. So it doesn't help either side, and we just want to be more realistic about that.
I mean, you are stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't you? I mean, obviously, you want to protect workers' rights, but you do need the business to grow, the economy to grow, and a lot of that is down on SMEs. People will say, though, there is a danger, at least, that the balance between employer and employee is going to end up leaning too much towards the employer after this.
Well, I think you posed the question perfectly fairly. We are trying to strike a balance here. I think we have got a good balance, and actually Britain, as a country, starts off in a reasonably good place on employment law, because over the last two years and a bit, we've had over 1 million new private sector jobs created, albeit in a very difficult economic environment, and that couldn't have happened if we didn't have very flexible labour markets. So we start from a reasonably good place, but I do acknowledge there are genuine problems for small companies in particular in relation to employment cases, and we want to make that easier without creating large-scale insecurity in the labour force and undermining basic employer rights. I think we've got the balance right.
Taxpayers Alliance isn't happy with your department this morning, Minister. Department of Business is wasteful. You pay more for paper than anybody else. You pay 3 times more for energy than the Department of Defence. Why is your department so inefficient?
Well, I wasn't aware of those two facts until they were drawn to my attention this morning. I will certainly get in touch with our officials who handle procurement and try to make sure we have best practice. Obviously, we must be as efficient as possible, and I accept the criticism and we'll deal with it.
You would have thought it'd be fairly easy across government, wouldn't you, just to get all these procurement issues just levelled across the board?
Well, it would seem to be easy, but if you're talking about energy, for example, of course, different government offices are much, vary greatly in their level of energy efficiency. I mean, we do actually switch off the lights on a regular basis. We try to deal with this sensibly, but I'm sure there are things we can learn and improve, and I will go back to our officials and make sure we do that.
A final word, if you would, about Sir Mingus Campbell. I mean, he's said that as coalition partners, you need to show commitment to the coalition, raising those concerns, because we know that Nick Clegg has said, he's open to ideas of talking to Labour about a coalition after the next election. You've been getting texts, apparently, from Ed Miliband. What's going on?
Well, I don't know what the problem is. I mean, I do very, very occasionally, I'll often very, very occasionally talk to the leader of the Labour Party and indeed other people across the political spectrum about matters of national interest. I mean, surely that's grown up. You should be able to talk to people outside your own party, but I am very firmly committed to working in the government, the coalition government. I have an important job to do, and I'm getting on with it.
It's difficult, though, isn't it, in the run-up to the next election, where every party is trying to work out where they're going to be, and obviously Lib Dems, if anything, if you want to stay in power, are going to have to be coalition partners. At some point, you're going to have to start moving away from the Tories, aren't you?
Well, we will go into the next election with our own distinct philosophy and policies, but in the meantime, and we've got quite a long time before the next general election, well over 2 years, we're committed to working under the coalition agreement that we've negotiated, and as I say, I have an important job within that agreement. You've just been asking me a whole series of questions about it, and I'm committed to that work. But at the same time, I have a very relaxed approach to talking to other people. I mean, I simply see that as basically fairly adult, and I really don't see what the problem is.
Secretary of State, thank you. Miners